Did you know that you can get this same great episode of the Rural Woman podcast ad-free? I get it. Listening to ads during a podcast isn't always my favorite either. But in order to keep the lights and coffee pot on here at the Rural Woman Podcast Studios, they are necessary. I am so grateful to each and every one of my sponsors, but if you yourself would like to skip the ads while supporting the show, consider joining me over on Patreon. Patrons of the Rural Woman Podcast get ad-free episodes starting at Tier 5 on their podcast player of choice each week, plus some other great benefits. Find out more by heading to the link in today's show notes to learn how you can become a patron through Patreon. Hi, I'm Caitlin Dubin, and this is the Rural Woman Podcast. I'm a first-generation farmer who married into agriculture. Born and raised in a city, I was so unfamiliar with where my food came from, but I was determined to figure it out. Through my journey into agriculture, I saw women who were strong but humble, often taking a back seat. To me, these women were leaders who deserved a seat at the table. I created the Rural Woman Podcast to share the voices of women in an industry whose stories often went untold. The rural entrepreneurs who live and breathe their work, full of grit and pride. We come here to share our stories, to be in community with each other, to be challenged and inspired, but most importantly, to be celebrated and to be heard. We may not all live, farm, ranch, or homestead the same, but we are all connected. We are rural women, and our stories are worthy of being told. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Rural Woman Podcast. Today you'll meet Chelsea Finn. Chelsea is a brand strategist, graphic designer, and founder of Hunter Finn Creative Co. She spent years in the big brand world with clients like Nike, Spotify, and BMW before the pandemic pressed pause and reshaped her priorities. What started as learning to grow food during the lockdown led her to trade in her corporate pace for muddy boots and a season apprenticing on a flower farm. Immersed in the soil, seasons, and the rhythm of small-scale agriculture, she spotted a gap that she could not ignore. Farmers with remarkable products and stories, but no clear path to reach the people hungry for them. Without further ado, my friends, let's get to this week's episode with Chelsea. Chelsea, welcome to the Rural Woman Podcast. How are you today?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing very well. I am so excited to meet you and to dive into more of your interesting story on how you're involved in agriculture and all the good things. So for the folks who are unfamiliar with you, give us your background, tell us who you are, where you're from, and what your connection to agriculture is.
Yeah, totally. So my name is Chelsea Finn, not Hunter Finn. That'll come up later. Yeah, and I grew up in Edmonton, Alberta, but I've lived in British Columbia for the last little bit, between Revelstoke, Vancouver, back to Alberta for a bit. And yeah, now I live in Vancouver. And then, connection to ag. I grew up in the city. So I grew up in Edmonton. I didn't really have any connection to agriculture. My whole family is from the East Coast, from Newfoundland. So no farmers, all fishermen. And yeah, growing up, I always wanted to be involved in like a farm. I always wanted a farm. I rode horses growing up. But yeah, very much a city girl. Moved to Calgary after I got my degree. Thought I was going to move to either Cupertino, work for Apple, or New York City. And yeah, that didn't happen. A pandemic happened instead. And in 2023, I worked on a flower farm. So that is my connection to everything.
That is such a broad overview, and it is my job now to dig into every little piece of that.
All over the place.
So growing up, you got to ride horses, which is, I think, almost every little girl's dream. In that, what did you know about farms and farming? Where did you think your food came from?
Yeah, as a kid, I probably didn't know anything about where my food came from. Yeah, I think my perception of farms when I was little was probably just like based on fairy tales and like folklore and all those like nursery rhymes and everything. Yeah, I joke that I had like a folklore based upbringing, not very scientific. A lot of tales from like Irish and English folklore based on like Newfoundland stuff. So yeah, I think I had a very fanciful view of everything. Yeah, so just rode horses just outside the city, started Western, and then went English. Now the city has encroached on where I used to ride, so that doesn't exist anymore. And yeah, that was kind of, I think I used to want to be like a rodeo gal. um, but that didn't come to pass for various reasons. Got into high school sports, and then horseback riding just took up too much time.
So you mentioned that you went to post-secondary. What did you study?
So I did my Bachelor of Design at the University of Alberta in Edmonton, so just down the road from my parents' house. Very convenient for me. Yeah, so I studied design, visual communication design in particular, with a minor in business and marketing. So my approach to design is always based on, like business and marketing objectives. My schooling was what I call like rigorously traditional. We learned how to use like a printing press and bind books by hand and use the photography darkroom and all of that, and studied lots of art history and things. So it wasn't like the most applicable to digital. That's where sort of like internships and things came in when I was towards the end of my degree. And I was like, no one's going to hire me to bind a book. Got to figure out the digital side of things. So that's where marketing and all that comes in.
Very cool. And you mentioned that big dreams to work for companies such as Apple. How did that work out for you? Or where did you end up in corporate, I guess?
Yeah. So right out of university, I ended up getting an internship at a international like ad agency down in Calgary. So I had grand plans to kind of be a bit of a bum after university for a bit and live out of a van. And that didn't come to pass. Got an internship and they decided to keep me around. So went straight into, the corporate world, working with big clients all over, mostly North America, but our team spanned the whole world. So there'd be times when I was checking in with like Tokyo and then London and then LA and then going to bed and then doing it all again. Yeah, so working with like the big name clients in business development was my role. So drafting pitches for winning new business from brands like BMW, Spotify, like all the ones that we know and toss around on a daily basis. Yeah, Nike, AT&T, all that stuff. And yeah, of course, Apple was a big one as well.
Very cool. So talk to me about that corporate setting and what that was like for you in that experience.
At first, it was great. It's definitely what I thought I wanted to do. Like I mentioned, like New York was kind of the end goal, especially because a bunch of my team for business development was out in New York. And I was like, okay, I'll do this for a few years and then they'll move me out there. And doing it for a few years was, just like anyone who's entering a pretty intense industry where you get paid very poorly and have to put in all the hours and kind of be on call 24/7. And you can't really say no. Like I mentioned, like the London to LA time zone, that was like my work day. So that's a very long day. And just kind of being like, on call 24/7 for cool stuff, but definitely not anything that's a real emergency. Like we weren't saving lives in any way, but definitely very glitzy, glammy from the outside as a new grad trying to, work her way up in the corporate world. Yeah. And that sheen sort of wore off right around the time that the pandemic hit.
Right. Yeah. So take us back to that time and, the 2020 working for corporate and, like you said, glitzy glam job. So how does someone go from that job to being an intern on a flower farm?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, so the world kind of shut down, as we can all remember or refuse to remember, in 2020. I lasted 1 week in my Calgary apartment alone. And then it was like, okay, we're going to keep doing this work from home thing. So I went back to my parents' house, to the desk that I did all my university career at. And just like kept working in that time, like in the business world, we were pitching pretty much anything, even if it wasn't like an aligned client. So that definitely took its toll over a year of like lockdown from home work. Like I mentioned, long hours. And at the same time, the grocery store shelves were empty. And like in BC, everything was quite literally on fire. And I was just like, this feels really weird, like to be at home, like working on my little computer when around me, like the world was like burning down, it felt like. And that's when I started to like ask the question of like, oh, like I don't know how to grow my own food and I don't know where any of it comes from. Like it's all shut down, like the world's shut down. So there's no food on the grocery store shelves, but like, what does that mean? And I feel like every millennial in COVID got really into gardening. And that was me. Got out all the books from the library, convinced my parents to put in like an extra veggie patch in the backyard, and tried to learn as much as I could about like permaculture and growing my own food and all of that. So that was like the inciting incident, I guess, in this whole path that's led me here. From there, I lasted a year working like lockdown hours from my parents' house. And then I decided that I was kind of wasting my time, maybe my skills. The world was ending and I didn't want to just be trying to make Nike more money. So I decided to start my own gig, started my own business in 2021, Hunter Finn Creative Co. And that's how I kind of ended up on a flower farm. A few more steps in between, but yeah.
So starting your own business and coming from corporate, what was your view of entrepreneurship when you started versus maybe what you've learned to today?
Yeah, when I started, I don't really think I knew much. In university, I did a year abroad in Leeds in England. And as part of that, I took an entrepreneurship class, which feels kind of weird for like a business school to be teaching you an entrepreneurship class. It's like, isn't that something you just kind of learn on the go? But that was interesting. And I had to interview my dad for it because he started his own business. So that was interesting. I think that was like my main perception of entrepreneurship when I started, was just like, oh, that's like, I guess my dad did that. Like he started his own business and so did his dad and so on and so forth. Like all of my dad's side of the family is very entrepreneurial. But since then, I've learned a whole heck of a lot about entrepreneurship, like working with small businesses in Revelstoke is where I started. So like, I like to call them like my hippy dippy businesses in the mountain town. So like tea and jewelry and like handmade natural deodorant and photography and all of that sort of stuff is how I started out, the clients that I started out with. And now I've pivoted into land-based businesses.
So starting Finn & Co., when you launched your own business, what were you providing your clients at that time?
So I still primarily focus on branding. So that was always my favorite part of school. We did a lot of focus on branding projects, visual identity creation in school. And that was something that I had really missed out on in the pitching and like business development world and like creating ads in the agency. Primarily graphic design, branding, and website design for, I call them growers, healers, makers, and dreamers is who I started out serving.
So talk to me then about the lead up to becoming an apprentice at a flower farm in Castor, Alberta.
So as part of the whole COVID, like learn how to grow your own food thing, and then moving to Revelstoke is a really small community in the mountains. And if the highway is closed, there's no food that comes in. So the town is really focused on food security. And it has a really vibrant local food scene. So that was a great place to move as someone who was interested in learning more about the food system. I moved in with two of my best friends, and our landlord let us have a pretty big garden in the backyard. So that was a big part of it. And me and one of my friends started hatching a plan that we probably wanted to start a farm one day. She decided she was going to tackle vegetables. And then she went to the UBC Sustainable Agriculture program in Vancouver and went to farm school and learned how to farm, and then continued to work at farms in Revelstoke since then. And then she said, she said she was going to take vegetables. And then I was in charge of flowers because she was like, oh, there's this cool girl I follow on Instagram in Alberta, and she has a flower farm and sheep and like raises lamb. And her name's Nikki. Here's her Instagram handle. It's Ladies Hat Farm. So that was how that started. And then about 2 years later, Nikki had posted on Instagram and said she was hiring an apprentice through Young Agrarians. And I sent it to my friend Georgie. And I was like, oh, are you going to go to Castor for the summer and learn how to farm flowers? And she's like, no, like I have my farm job, but you should go. And I was like, okay, sure. So I applied and I got accepted. And then in 2023, I moved to the middle of nowhere near Castor, Alberta. Being from Alberta, I'd never heard of Castor my whole life until until the interview for the apprenticeship. Googled it. It's a town of 800 people. And that's where I spent my summer for 2023.
That's amazing. And such like a roundabout journey, right? Of making, the joke with a friend, an inside joke that you'll do the flowers of your new upcoming farm that you're dreaming of. So talk to me about that experience of being an apprentice on the flower farm with Nikki, and how did it deepen your understanding of flower farming and small scale and sustainable agriculture?
Totally. Yeah. So like, I feel like at this point, when we lay it all out in a line, it feels like there's a definite theme of like, I'm just like, yeah, I'll figure it out. Like, I'll just jump in like both feet. And I feel like a lot of people that start their own businesses are kind of like that. It's just like, I don't need a plan. It'll work out. I'll figure it out. That's definitely what happened here. I had no farm experience. I'd never worked like an outside job. I'd only worked inside jobs. And came out here, jumped in both feet, learned everything I possibly could about running a land-based business, like a flower business. We planted and created new gardens that I'm like looking at now. And picked thousands and thousands of flowers, dried a bunch of them. I got to do deliveries for the Cooperative Flower Network in Edmonton. So bring flowers from here back to Edmonton. We did subscriptions for CSA, farmers markets, basically everything. I wanted to touch every part of the flower business that I could. And like Chris and Nikki were super generous with all of that here and let me, get involved in everything I could. As part of it out here, I got to like shadow on neighboring farms and ranches. Like Nikki's been on the podcast. So like on that episode, Jenna and Dana were on with her talking about the Prairie Farm Project. So got to go see what those folks were up to at those neighboring farms. And just like learn so much about the incredible work that people are doing out here in the middle of nowhere that people don't know about. Like people in the city or my hippy dippy mountain town, like they're searching for this stuff, but they have no idea that it exists and that there's people just doing like regenerative agriculture and sustainable, like small scale floral agriculture and everything there. So it was very eye-opening. And like, I thought I was passionate about like local food and sustainable food systems before, but it definitely got to a whole other level after my apprenticeship.
Yeah, absolutely. And Nikki and the other farms from the Prairie Farm Project are just, I look at them and it's funny to me because I remember meeting them for the first time and I remember hearing their story and the reaction that I got from audiences, and even recently had a conversation about their story years later, and how it's funny because to me, in my mind, this is how agriculture used to be. Right? Like your neighbor helped neighbor and it wasn't as competitive. It was, we all need to grow food to feed people and we do things as a collective, not as an individual. And it's funny because it seems like agriculture now can feel so far removed from that system. And to know that there are some young, cool people doing this in, quote, the middle of nowhere and being able to essentially bring agriculture back to the way it used to be in a cool way. Yeah, they are a great group of folks. I, off the top of my head, do not remember the episode number of that one, but I will put it in the show notes, as well as Dana Penrice was on the podcast previously, and she does great work with the Young Agrarians program, and they do fantastic work of bringing folks, whether they have an agriculture background or don't have an agriculture background at all, into the agriculture industry to make it accessible for people. So I'm going to list those in the show notes for the folks listening to look back on those episodes, because they were pretty cool. So working in the marketing field, you obviously bring a different perspective to these farms as a marketer. And I can say that the majority of people who own and operate farms are not professional marketers, and vice versa. Professional marketers are not farmers. So talk to me about the gap and the disconnect that you saw from your area of expertise versus the new area that you were learning about.
Yeah, absolutely. So like you mentioned, not many people who farm are professional marketers. Like, I mean, within like the three people that we spoke about, like the Prairie Farm Project, like Nikki has a writing background, so that's really handy for marketing. But yeah, overall for myself, just seeing like the big disconnect between like that ideal customer, like I mentioned, who's like really hungry and like looking for food that's produced this way, or flowers that are produced this way, and the people out here producing it that are like in the trenches every day, just like trying to deal with everything that happens on a farm and all the work that goes into that, like day and night. And then also trying to figure out how to do marketing and like what brand strategy is and what a brand is and all of that. Like for me, I can see it so clearly and like from a different lens, because that's just what my whole education and my whole corporate background is figuring out how like these big brands tell compelling stories that inspire customer loyalty. And then as I started my own journey of entrepreneurship and working with those like growers, healers, makers, dreamers before coming to the farm, yeah, like the principles are the same essentially, no matter what size of brand you're working with. And for me, I can just like see this incredible product that these people are producing with so much story and so much heart and love and care and attention and detail that goes into it. And there's just like, they don't have the expertise or the capacity even to share that story and tell it in a way that, yeah, inspires that customer loyalty and makes people want to become part of it. So that's where like the wheel started turning for myself about like, I'm so passionate about this and everyone I'm meeting is so passionate about this and they're doing the coolest stuff. And everyone in Revelstoke that I know is so passionate about this. And like my friends in the city are so passionate about this, but they're just like, they need to talk to each other and they need to find each other. But that's a really tall ask of someone who's doing the actual farming every single day.
Right. Absolutely. And to hear you say that, right, is validating everyone's feelings that is listening to this right now, because we all, the saying, like, we all have the same number of hours in the day, like, it just makes me cringe, right? And especially when you're talking to a farmer, when you work in seasons and, you literally only have so many hours of daylight in a day to get, things seeded, to harvest, to like do any of these things. So following your apprenticeship and, going back to, quote, real life of, running your own business, what was kind of the big aha moment to make the shift to pivot to serving directly with farmers and specifically woman-owned land businesses in their branding and marketing?
It was, so after I left the farm here, I moved to Vancouver. And that was a little bit of like a culture shock to go from like the wide open prairies to my little tiny shoebox in Vancouver with like people on every single side at all times. And I think it's funny. It's like the exact thing that everyone, like all the land-based businesses that I work with are selling, is like that connection and that community to like the land and where your food comes from, and the community, like you mentioned, of people doing agriculture in a different way. Like that's essentially what I was seeking for myself once I like moved to the city, and I was like, I need to get back to that like real, raw, gritty, like good that I felt all summer at the farm. And I was like, I want to work with these people. Like I want to like have a little bit of that connection and community in my life now that's like in the city and removed from the land. So yeah, I just started seeking out, like you said, yeah, like women owned or run rural land-based businesses, usually with a like regenerative or holistic sort of spin. Yeah, because like the world needs what they've got, and there's people who are so hungry for it. And like I was one of those people, and I just really wanted to, yeah, do anything I could to help these businesses succeed and become profitable and sustainable so that they can continue to exist and continue to serve their customers, their community, and yeah, like leave a lasting legacy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think of my work, I guess, on both sides of the desk and out in the field and sitting right here. I think there is an appreciation from farmers to professionals who have that connection and that can understand what we go through on a seasonal basis and kind of understand the way that our industry works on our end of the thing to get that story and to get that message on the outside without having to take away our most valuable resource, which is literally our time. Talk to me. How did your experience both in big brand advertising and on the farm shape your value-based approach with approaching these businesses and sharing what you could offer them?
So like in the agency world and like the business world, like sprints are pretty sexy. People like those. So that's just doing a lot of work in a short amount of time. Usually a sprint would be like 2 weeks or up to like 6 weeks, with like each week being a different task essentially, or a different focus. And then when I was here, figuring out how, yeah, like you mentioned, like time is such a premium. Like being inside during working hours is a pretty, again, a very tall ask for people working in agriculture. Also, just like stuff always happens. Like if it can go wrong, it will go wrong, sort of thing. So I was like, okay, how can we like bring these two things together? Because a sprint-based approach is a really great way to get a lot done in a really short amount of time. But I was like, I can't ask people to come in and be inside for that long. And like how I was running projects before was traditional like design or marketing agency, where you have like weekly check-ins and a project can take like 4 or 6 weeks. And again, I was like, that's not going to work. So now what I've done is all of my projects are like a sprint-based, like asynchronous approach, which sounds really big techie business. But basically what it means is you have me and I have you for like one dedicated week, and you have specific times where you have to be inside just for 1 hour at a time. And then other than that, you go about your daily life and you do all the things that are required to run your business outside and like on the admin side, while I work away as a little like worker bee behind the scenes. And then at the end of the week, we get to a product or a project completion that would have taken traditionally like 4 weeks. Yeah. So just like taking, like you mentioned, like that understanding of what it's like to actually be here. Because when I was here for my apprenticeship, I was like, oh yeah, I can do both. Like I can totally keep doing client work and do farm work. Like it'll be fine. It'll be so doable. Totally not. Like once it's high summer and you're having like dinner at 10 p.m. and then you have to wake up super early, and it's like, there's no time. There's absolutely no time. So just taking that into how I approach all my projects with clients now has been super helpful.
How has that translated for your clients, that sprint approach? Is that something that has been working for them? Is that something that they're not used to?
Yeah, I think lots of times people aren't used to it. They're used to the more traditional, like, oh, this is going to take 4 weeks and it's going to be drawn out. But yeah, people really like it. And it also helps a lot with like the decision paralysis that I feel like a lot of business owners or brand owners can get into because we do it all in a week. So you're forced to make the decisions really quickly and take action really quickly, which is like my role is to like gently nudge you a little bit out of your comfort zone and make sure that things are happening and we're getting momentum and getting to our goal quite quickly. And then it's really great because everything is broken down into like a 1 week chunk. So it's not necessarily like doing your whole brand strategy and your visual identity and your website and your marketing plan all at once, because that's a lot. It's usually taking those as individual chunks. So then in between, you can like go have a baby, which has happened, or like go like buy a house, or like grow your farm or grow your business, grow your family, test out the marketing messaging or test out the website and see how it's going. And then you come back and like, I already know everything about your business. And then we can just pick up right where we left off and do another week. And then same thing, like just rinse and repeat. I've designed like all my services now to sort of work with and like grow with my clients, which is so fun because yeah, like I get to see them accomplish these goals or like, yeah, like have babies, and just, it's just like the most rewarding and heartwarming approach that I've found in business. And it keeps it really fresh and really fun, and you don't get bored with it, which I think a lot of business owners tend to have a shorter sort of like attention span. It's like, let's do this one thing that's really exciting right now. And then like the dopamine sort of like wears off of it, or the novelty wears off of it. So that's sort of how I've tried to roll everything into one little ball.
You can help support the stories of women in agriculture to be shared through the Rural Woman podcast on Patreon. What is Patreon? It's a membership-based platform that helps fund and support creators like me to create and produce content like this that you all love. New to the Rural Woman podcast Patreon is ad-free listening and patron-only bonus content and exclusive episodes. Learn more and join the patron gang today at patreon.com/The Rural Woman Podcast. Talk to me about maybe some struggles. Like we've talked about time. Time is always a struggle for a farmer. The dopamine or the lack of dopamine. I'm very guilty of this. I come up with the greatest idea and I want to do all of the fun parts of that idea. But then the rest of it, I'm just like, I have no interest in doing that. And it goes on the ever growing to-do list in my business. What are some struggles that you've seen farmers face when it comes to identifying what their brand is and what maybe the brand strategy is?
Yeah, the shiny object or the dopamine of just being the idea person is awesome. But then sometimes you need like an executor or an accountability buddy, which is essentially my role in all things, is to keep you on track for a short amount of time and get it going. I think some of the common struggles that I see is a little bit of like, how am I different than anyone else from business owners? And I don't know if we would call that imposter syndrome. Why would they buy my broccoli if they could buy it at the grocery store? Or why would they buy my flowers if they could buy them from this other flower farmer who's also doing a great job? So figuring out how to tell your brand story in a really compelling way that makes it really clear, like who you are, what you stand for, what you're offering people. I think that's a really big challenge that people run into, especially as the business owner. You're so close to it and like you've lived the life of it. So it can be really hard to see it from outside eyes, especially if you are like working alone or friends that you can like bounce ideas off of, but it's not quite the same as like having a trained eye come in and see where things could be tweaked to transform your story. So I think that's one of the challenges. And then so many folks are like, oh, I'm not techie. Like I'm not a tech person. I don't do any of the tech stuff. So that's, again, where I can come in and help make a custom solution that's like not super techy, very approachable amount of tech.
I love when people are like, I'm not techie. However, I operate a piece of equipment that is all done with GPS and precision this and that. And I'm like, and you can't make a Facebook post? Like, I think there's that disconnect there. I want to talk about social media and, the tool that it is for growing people's businesses. I know there is, from talking to people, again, there's so many hours in the day. There's so many different platforms to be using for social media, whether that's Meta or whether that's X or whether that's TikTok or any of these things. What is your advice for people listening who are looking to grow their business using social media? Any tips that you can provide them?
Yes, there are only so many hours in the day. So I think it's pretty unreasonable to expect yourself to be able to do every single one that you just mentioned. If you can, and if you enjoy it, and if it's bringing in customers, then great. But other than that, I think just focusing on like one platform as a way to get people onto your email list is truly like the most effective way. Because the reality is like you don't own your audience on any of those platforms. And with the current situation, with all of our tech CEOs going a little, they're making some interesting choices. So it's always a good idea to make sure that you have a way to reach people who are in your audience if, for whatever reason, the tech platforms or social media platforms aren't available to you anymore. That's a big one.
Talk to me more about email marketing and the use that you have used it for your own business and how your clients have been able to utilize that in their marketing strategy.
Yeah. So email marketing is a great way, like you said, to use in your marketing strategy. Anything that you're saying on social can absolutely be repurposed into an email. I don't want people to feel like they have to do a completely different thing in their email newsletter if they're already doing social, because that seems like a whole lot of extra work. You can get really strategic and scrappy, which I think farmers are the best at, and figure out a way to make it all work and be super efficient and get the most lifetime out of any of the words that you're saying online. Just repurpose them into an email. Emails are great for creating wait lists, for guaranteeing that your content gets in front of the eyes of your customer. Because again, on social media, there's no guarantee that even half of your followers are going to see it. It's a little bit of a gamble. So email marketing, again, is where it's at. I'm sure if anyone has listened to any marketing podcast, this is like the same information, but you're going to keep hearing it over and over and over because it's true. Yeah. If you don't have an email plan, stop this and like go make one right now.
I think it's funny that you say that, you've heard how XYZ, however many people say this advice before. However, we hear the same advice over and over. And yet when it comes from people who are in the industry or have worked in the industry that we're in, I think it makes a difference because of the understanding, again, of that time of being a valuable resource. And if we can be outside or working in our business elsewhere, we're most likely going to choose that versus the sitting down, writing a welcome email sequence and all of these things. When we have professionals that understand our restrictions, I think that's when the value add is there for you.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, like if the main, and it's really important also to have specific goals with social media. So you're not just mindlessly sort of like falling into the scroll hole or like just posting because you feel like you have to post. It's like, oh, everyone says you have to post, so I'll just post. Making sure that you have a really specific goal. And usually the goal that I recommend for clients is to get people from social onto their email list. if that's the goal, and like each week you can measure how many people are getting onto your email list because you're inviting them and like inviting them into the brand story and like all of these other things that we've already talked about, that can be really helpful to make social media feel a lot less soul-sucking and give it a purpose.
Absolutely, right? Because I think ideally, at the end of the day, the purpose of marketing and branding and social media and all of these things is for farmers to make a profit from their marketing plan,
Yes.
right? To sell their goods,
Yes.
whether it's a physical good, a digital good, any of these things, right? Like at the end of the day, does social media make you feel good? Maybe sometimes. But other than that, it's there as a tool for your marketing. And I want to go back to a thought that I just had. You were sharing before that a struggle that folks have is understanding why their story is important or why their story is different than any other farmer doing something similar. Have there been any like aha moments that your clients have shared with you from the work that you've been doing with them in discovering what that brand story is?
Yeah, that's always where it's so fun and everyone gets so like shivery, like almost of just like how exciting it is to be like, oh my God, it's been there the whole time. But I just didn't see it. And it's like, then it feels like a huge weight. Like I can almost see like the relaxing that clients do of just like, oh my God, it's not as hard as I've been making it. Like I can just be me and like I can just tell this story and I don't have to like put on a front or like really struggle with like marketing or the story I'm telling. It's just like, oh my God, okay, like I can do that. That's so doable. And I think like that's the best feeling when, when they're like telling me, when I'm asking all the questions and like getting to know their business. And then for me, I'm just like, oh, it's staring me right in the face. Like you've been doing this, but I think what's actually going on is this other thing. And then, usually there's like a little bit of silence and then sometimes there's tears. But that's always where it's like so rewarding. And then to like take it one step further and see that story really resonate with their clients or their customers. And then, like you said, like lead to sales and lead to profit. And then have them be able to reinvest that into like an infrastructure expansion or equipment. And like, it's so like rewarding and tangible to be like, oh, we figured out this thing and then we marketed it. And now you can buy like a hoop house or an implement or something that is then going to expand your business even further. And it's like, you could just see the little line because we figured out their story. And that's what makes all of it so special and like so worth it. Yeah. So if anyone thinks they don't have a story that's worth telling, I mean, that's your whole thesis, right? With this podcast. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Whenever I meet folks and I say that I do a podcast and I share stories and I would love to share their story, they're like, I don't have one. My response is hold my beer because like this is what I'm here for, right? We'll get it out of you one way or the other.
Yeah.
So what is next for you, Chelsea, in the legacy of what you are building for your business?
So long-term plan is always to join the ranks of these rural women with their land-based businesses. That is my long-term plan for sure. Always has been, I guess, since I was little. Just didn't quite have the words to say it when I was like 6 years old. So that's a long-term plan. But between here and there, I said that I was learning business through design when I started my design business. And I'm learning farming now, like through my design business. So just to continue to help as many women as possible running land-based businesses. Like make it's pretty simple. Just like help more women make more money so that their businesses can continue and they can leave a legacy that they're proud of. And then hopefully join you one day as one of those people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think I can collectively say we would love that. Come along with us, right? So my last question is always, what is the most rewarding part about XYZ? You've already answered the rewarding part about the marketing aspect of who you are and your job and your company. But I want to know, what is the most rewarding part about being a flower farmer for you in what you learned through working with Nikki?
I think the most rewarding part is the connection to the land. And I feel like that's like the most basic answer, but it's just so true. Like that summer, I felt so like good and like just so close to, I don't know, there's like something I think in us humans that just really feels good being like out under the sky, like on the little layer of soil above the earth, and like just being in that space, especially as someone who's grown up in the city and lived in cities and never had that experience. It was just like, oh, this feels like something my body already knows, but like I've never done it. So that was pretty crazy. Yeah. And then just being able to, like see a whole life cycle of a season of flowers. And we also raised pigs. And that was a really rewarding part of it as well that I don't talk about as much, but that was really, really special to see the little piggies and raise them and be there to witness their end of life and then share their meat with like my nearest and dearest at really special occasions throughout like the next year, and then get to tell the story. I think that's kind of it. Yeah. Just being out, the connection. Yeah.
That's awesome. I have to tell you that it's funny because, that is a question that I will ask the 200 plus women that I've interviewed, is what's the most rewarding part? And it's funny because everybody comes back to say, well, I don't think it's, that unique or that special. But what you said is, having that connection and feeling so connected. When you didn't have that before, there are folks who forget that there are people outside of agriculture that didn't have this experience growing up. They didn't know where their food or their flowers or their bacon came from, right? Like we didn't know these things. So to have that feeling of that connection, it's a great reminder for us to look back on and be like, wow, like I did that. It's very cool. But also it's a great reminder for folks who are born and raised in this industry to really connect back to that too, and to feel proud and have that be a rewarding part for them too. So I love what you said. Doesn't matter how basic it is. I feel the same.
Yeah. Like if that gets to be your day to day of just being outside and getting to see like how an individual plant changes day to day and like through the whole season, I think that's so special. And like so many of us don't have that anymore. Yeah. And like, not to tie it back to like my whole thing, but like that's what people are paying for your products for, is that connection. Like the people in the city, like they don't have access to that life cycle. So that's what you have to show them. So if you're ever wondering what to show people on social media, just show them literally that.
Literally.
Yeah.
Every step of the way.
Yeah.
It's always very interesting.
Yeah.
Chelsea, thank you so much for sharing your story with us today. For the folks who would like to connect with you after the show, where can they find you online?
Instagram is probably the best place. hunterfin.co is the handle. And hunterfin.co is also the website. So same.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I will link all of those in the show notes, including the episodes that we mentioned previously about Nikki and the crew for the Prairie Farm Project and Dana from the Young Agrarians. Chelsea, thank you so much for sharing your story with me today. I truly appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Rural Woman Podcast. The Rural Woman Podcast is more than just a podcast. We are a community. A huge thank you to the Rural Woman Podcast team, audio editor Max Hofer, and a special thanks to our Patreon executive producers, Sarah Riedner from Happiness by the Acre. To learn how you can become a Patreon executive producer or other ways to financially support the show, head on over to wildrosefarmer.com to learn more. Be sure to hit the follow or subscribe button wherever you listen to the podcast to get the latest episodes directly on your playlist. And if you are loving the show, please be sure to leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or any other platform that accepts ratings and reviews. You can connect with us on social media at The Rural Woman Podcast and with me at Wild Rose Farmer. One of the best ways you can support the show is by sharing it. Send this episode to a friend or share on your social media. Let's strengthen and amplify the voices of women in agriculture together. Until next time, my friend, keep sharing your story. This week's episode of the Rural Woman Podcast is brought to you by the patrons of the Rural Woman Podcast. This amazing group of individuals contribute financially to the Rural Woman Podcast to ensure the stories of women in agriculture hit your earbuds each and every week. Want to join them in supporting the stories of women in agriculture while getting access to extended episodes, patron-only episodes, and other great perks? Head on over to wildrosefarmer.com to learn more about how you can become a patron through Patreon.